Welcome to Take the Plunge, a show about entrepreneurs and how they decided to set up their first business. Today is our first version of our live TV series, so we're very excited to be joined by Ernesto, an absolute serial entrepreneur who came to the UK in 2003 with £350 and now has expanded into 15 franchises, I believe, covering 32 different stores and covering 450 people, which is pretty impressive in such a short time frame. So we're very delighted to have you, Ernesto. How are you doing today?
Great. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and good to chat about the journey so far. I don't think it's a short time. It's been almost 20 years, so that seems like a long time, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've done a lot. So I suppose take me back to 2003. Why did you decide to come over here, and how did you start to fall into business? Did you go for it straight away, or talk me through that kind of initial
Yeah,
journey?
it's a great starting point because a lot of people sometimes think, oh, you had a plan before everything,
Yeah.
and that's you always dream about this, and you had it in your vision board when you were growing up, and actually none of that happened before.
Yeah.
It kind of was by chance. The reality is, I did come over to UK initially just for a very short period of time to learn English. I spoke very basic English, almost nothing, and I thought just go for an English course for literally a few weeks or a couple of
Yes.
months. And then I ended up realizing, actually, I won't learn English in a couple of months. I probably just take 6 months or more.
Yeah.
So I set up myself to do more a long-term English course. And then I started to look for a job. And
Yeah.
my first job as a student, which I was allowed to work part-time at the time, was in a Subway restaurant.
Yes.
And that's how it sort of started. I just sat, I was 23, it was my job, and here's my job. My job was to work in a Subway. Now, in Subway, there are no positions like you would have in McDonald's, like this,
Yeah.
the guys that are cooking and the guys at the cash, till the point. Everyone in Subway does everything.
Yes.
So, but I wasn't allowed to do everything because I couldn't speak English, so I couldn't serve customers.
Okay.
I mean, I could learn the basics of what tomato and a lettuce is, but
Yeah.
but if they will have special requests, I would like completely blank. So my role was to go at the back and
Yeah.
be essentially the kitchen porter. I used to do the washing up and the chopping the vegetables and cleaning everything up, and that's how the story began. It's a very long story how from that point how I got to become the manager of the store in a very short period of time, but I always put it down to values. And I think a lot of people that were with me at the time used to see this, oh, I hate my job. I don't want to be here. I'm doing this because I have to get a paycheck.
Yes.
I'm studying university because I'm going somewhere else.
Yes.
Like nobody had a dream or a career plan in that industry.
Yes.
Therefore, there was no commitment, engagement, or interest.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, it's like, well, I did a business degree before.
Yes.
And the key thing for me was like, I always maybe think that at some point I want to have my own business.
Yes.
And I want to learn from inside. It's a great
Yes.
opportunity how one of the best world franchises work. And I remember at uni studying McDonald's, have this model of
Yes.
streamlining processes and efficiencies and all of that. So like, well, I'm right inside one of them and I can really absorb as much as I can. I think it was that half empty glass, half full glass
Yes.
perspective. I thought,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
I'm going
yeah.
to spend so much of my time here. I don't want to be miserable. I want to enjoy it. I want to learn as much as I can. And I think it was that passion and that different perspective allowed me to be really immersed in it,
Yes.
learn a lot from it. And I think it was noticeable by my boss. It was, and it was her first franchise. She was starting out and she needed help. And things were not going according to plan. And I
Yes.
think she was very clear on also what she was doing.
Yes.
And that's how I became an integral part of that team. I mean, we team up, and I essentially gave her what she needed in terms of that management, that support, that dedication, and she gave me opportunities. And
Yes.
that's how we started. We team up. We're still business partners to this day.
Amazing.
Yeah, we set up our first business about a year after that,
Yes.
and that was my first business, Subway store with her. And from there on, obviously, just
Yeah.
grew the business.
But I suppose curious to see, like, is that such a refreshing way to think about the first job experience, especially as you're in education, but thinking about it in a holistic opportunity. You talked about there was obviously a marriage of skill sets between her and yourself. How were you, whilst also grappling with learning the English language, able to communicate to her around the areas that you could see were working or not working? Like, how did you start to uncover that?
At the beginning, it was harder. I think in the first 6 to 8 months, it was more about me focusing on doing my job
Yes.
well.
Yes.
And what a lot of business gurus will talk about today about going the extra mile,
Yes.
using that jargon. I will always make sure that it wasn't just the hours I was being paid for, but always want to do a good job all the time. And I think that allowed me to be quite knowledgeable, even though I have the barrier of the language. I think the quality of my job probably preceded me. And the reliability, again, is a kind of industry where it's easily anyone, putting a sickie on a Saturday morning and things like that, and I will always be there.
Yes.
So I think it's about the key element, looking back now as you ask this question, is actually building trust.
Yes.
And being able to become someone reliable, in this case, myself as an employee.
Yes.
And actually, now as a business owner, 20 years later, when I look at my business, and particularly in the restaurant industry that we're in, it's exactly that who I am to recruit. Somebody who's reliable and committed, as opposed to the technical knowledge you can easily teach.
Yes.
And so, a year later, of course, my English was still not great, but I was able to communicate. And I think it was just there. And I think it was a recognition that she had put the capital. She kind of knew how to do all the legal elements of it, but she probably didn't have experience in how to run a business from inside. And I think that's where I tapped into my skill set, and allowed it to come out.
And then I suppose, how did you decide to then, you're obviously learning as you go, you're seeing kind of the strengths that you have that is able to change this business, but you're also touching on the elements and the challenges of a service-based industry where it's hard to get employee motivation, you have to deal with potential high turnover, people showing up sick. So what made you still decide to go, I'm going to stick at this, and now I want to do another franchise with you? How did you think about kind of setting up a playbook to recruit people to come into the way you're thinking? How was that experience?
The short answer, maybe not the one you want to hear, but the answer is probably at that time I didn't really have more options.
No, that's fair.
And
between Goldman Sachs, no, it's not.
So like, okay, well, if I don't do this, what else do I do? Well, I don't know. I'd have to figure out, be another student, maybe work in McDonald's again and just be frying burgers.
Yeah, no, fair. Business owner, fair.
I thought, here I'm being seen.
Yes.
Here I'm feeling that I'm also adding value.
Yes.
And I've been recognized for that. And I think that that's important to me. And I think from a more personal development perspective, the satisfaction of doing a good job and being seen and being recognized was important.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to be a number in another big machine. Yeah. I felt, I also felt that she was being very grateful, and she would recognize that. I remember going to school one day and wanted to pay my fees, which I used to pay like monthly or something. And then the lady at the school said, oh no, your fees have been paid for the next 6 months.
Lovely.
And that was all on top of my wages, probably in a way of recognition from that sort of extra mile that I've been doing, and how I help her to rescue the business. There's a bit of a story there as well, which is that the previous manager she had was running the business really, really badly. The team was all a mess. And in a franchise like Subway and many other worldwide franchises, you have these standards that you have to comply with, quite strict, and you have these unannounced audits or evaluations every month, and if you don't pass them, then you're at risk of going into litigation where you lose the rights of having the franchise and the whole investment. And our store got to a point.
Oh wow!
And then the manager left, or she was, my God. And I wasn't appointed a manager, but I was the person who was there the longest and kind of the more knowledgeable, and by default I became the manager, even though I could only do it part-time. And I think once I took over and I started to create my own team and run it my own way, we turned the corner completely, and we went to become one of the best performing stores in the region. Which then Subway looked at with suspicion, because like how so quickly you go from being the worst performing store in the region to one of the best ones. So they sent a field consultant, they call it, to just go and see what was happening, shadowing what we were doing, identifying some great practices. That is so well. Not only you're following all the compliance, but you're doing all this other stuff that we've not seen before, which is very interesting. And it's our role to capture that knowledge and disseminate it across the network.
Yes.
And long story short is a couple of months later, they called back. My boss said, "Yeah, you are out of the litigation process. Well done for turning things around, and we'd like to take your manager to the U.S.
You?
To headquarters in Connecticut, in Milford, to give him some training and to capture what he's done in that store."
But that's pretty insane because if you think about it, like Subway have an ungodly amount of stores, and so whatever was in that data must have been pretty remarkable for them to make that level of effort.
It didn't seem quite difficult or extraordinary for me, but I just was quite stunned. Like, well, what is this different? And off I went to the US. I got the opportunity to meet Mr. Fred DeLuca, who now passed away, billionaire founder of Subway, and be in Subway campus, which is literally like a university with buildings and buildings and buildings. and that was great. And when I was there, they actually offered me the opportunity to become that field consultant, that person that goes around the stores in the region and to the audits, and I did.
Oh, you did? You took them up on that?
Yes, as well. So I had my kind of two roles afterwards, and that was great because it gave me a lot of business insight into the profitability of this unit, how it should be run. I kind of became a coach of these other franchisees.
So you had a real appreciation for all the margins and what was good, bad, and different in each one. So was that like massively helpful as you and your partner started to expand into other franchises?
Yeah, massively also, not only for that, but also for any other business ventures that I went on to afterwards.
Yes.
Because it gave me a clear understanding that, well, your product can be amazing, your idea can be fantastic, but the numbers have to stack up.
Yes.
I think one of the challenges I see with a lot of entrepreneurs that I have suffered myself, if you like, I've been a victim of, is that we become very passionate about our ideas.
Yeah, guilty as well.
And sometimes we can't see, we're naturally biased, and we can't really see that it's a business and you have to make money. And sometimes the product and service have to be tweaked to make sure that works. And those numbers, in a way, is a balancing act, right? What do you put first? You know, the profitability and the numbers, or your idea and your passion. And I think it have to be a very difficult balancing act between those two, because otherwise you lose your soul and your spirit and the essence of what you are. But at the same time, you can't just build a business out of passion.
No. Have you managed to learn how to fuse the two well, or is it just an ongoing battle?
I think it's just an ongoing balance. You know, like many things in life, you know, you have to balance health with also enjoying food and drink, you know, kind of thing. It's just something that you have to be mindful of, and you know, it's just a constant. And sometimes it might be tipped more to a side, more to the other, you know, but.
And talk me through a kind of the people development aspect, because it sounds like it's a pretty crucial step in terms of how your business kind of started to progress, because you showed capability in terms of putting a high performance team together. As you've expanded out into multiple stores, multiple franchises, how have you been able to disseminate what you've learned about managing people, motivating people? Really keen to understand like what you've learned.
It's a big passion of mine, that topic, so much so that I built a separate career, if you like, on the side of that. Ever since I was very young, I was well into personal development and psychology, and I went on to study psychology of management, which is what I did for after my postgraduate studies. But ever since earlier, it was all about. I mentioned earlier, I referred to that fulfillment, that feeling of I'm happy with what I'm doing, and that's sort of expressed into my personal life. You know, I don't want to be miserable at work and separate that from my life. I mean, we are taking ourselves to work, and work sometimes comes to us home as well. And I think it's a bit of a fantasy to say, oh, I have this very clear divide between the two. You know, we are one person.
Yes.
So being happy at work is important, and I think to definitely get the best out of people, they need to be motivated and committed, and that has to be aligned to the strengths, and they have to be aligned to their goals and where they want to be, and all those elements that we all as humans feel that we need. We need recognition, we need to be seen, we need to feel that we contribute, we need to feel that we belong to a team, to create a culture that people feel safe and happy. That's all very important. How we got to 15 Subway stores at that point, and later on how we got to the size of business we are now, I think is you can't do it all. I mean, even when you get into stores, you already lose control of it all. Especially when you're in service, you are not the one delivering that service to the customers or clients. So you depend on other people to do it, and they have to be committed and be motivated. upskilling, training the managers is a critical piece, because essentially that's where you clone yourself in a way.
Yes.
So how do I enable this team over here in this particular side to be run based on these values, and to be productive, and to be efficient, and to do all the good things that you want them to do, but without you micromanaging and interfering, and still allow them to be themselves and to put the stamp on things. So as we grow bigger and bigger, it's even more difficult, because it's easy for me to feel very attached to a particular way of doing things.
Yes.
But you're delegating, and they then coming up with different ideas. And then you do want to have these dictatorial, authoritarian thing. Well, no, this is how it's done because I know it's done. Or do you want them to come up with, oh, here's it. We created this dessert and it's amazing. Can we just sell this in this particular show? Well, that's not in line with my franchising principles. But I know that if I allow you to celebrate you for doing that, number one, I'm welcoming innovation.
Yes.
And number two, I know I'm allowing you to be very happy and highly committed and engaged with what you do.
Yes.
And nobody's going to do it better than if that's your own baby.
Yeah.
And I think that's a hard lesson for us to learn, entrepreneurs, business owners, and I'm still trying to learn.
Yeah, that's fair. But do you still have like a value-based system that you disseminate down and see these are our core values? Or, what are they?
We have essentially 4 core values. The first one for us will always be respect.
Yep.
And with that goes all the elements of diversity and inclusion and everything to do with that. But the second one, which for me is incredibly important, is being open to learn. And I think that's the basis of everything. I think it's very different when you have a conversation with somebody who's unaware of what they're not doing well, that they think that they're doing a fantastic job and they're quite self-righteous. And when you're trying to give them some feedback and say, well, actually, no, my story's been managed perfectly. I'm the perfect manager. I have nothing else to learn. Everyone should come and learn from me. I said, well, how do I break this to you? Actually, it's not quite like that. That you're in a little bubble and you have a big blind spot. If the person is completely unaware and not open to learning, they will become very defensive.
Yep.
And essentially, it's going to be a battle trying to get that over. So one of the key things in my team nowadays is that we all are conscious and aware that we always have development opportunities, and that we welcome feedback, and it's well intended. We work around the principle of positive regard. Everyone's trying to do their best, but also we all have opportunities to learn and develop, and that's fundamental in our team. If we recruit somebody that comes to work in our restaurants, and within 2 or 3 weeks we realize that they're not good at taking feedback, they can be incredibly talented, but we have to let them go. Yeah.
I suppose, have you learned a hard way, or has it been challenging? People, like, is there
very hard way?
Any stories that
I do have a very, very difficult story, actually very recent. I had a fantastic manager. Oh my God, I don't think I've seen in my entire life somebody as committed and hardworking as this guy.
Yeah.
And he will just put in any hours that were required. It was just sometimes too much. Sometimes I was actually concerned about his even well-being, because this is just too much.
Yes.
Even as a business owner, I'm not sure if I will be able to put in as much as you put it in.
Yeah.
He really cared. He did really care, but he had a challenge with his communication skills, and I think he was kind of coming from a perspective, or he had a view that employees are there to be lazy, and he have to be this micromanager that have to tell them off all the time, and his way of giving feedback wasn't great.
Yes.
And then the team became a revolving door. People didn't want, especially where we're talking about now millennials and Gen Z and how they work and how they like to be treated and all of that. It was just impossible.
Yes.
And not only that, but it was creating a very toxic environment. And it was just so hard, because when it comes to the actual job and the performance and the input, it was not even excellent. It was overly exceeding expectations.
Yes.
So how do you have that conversation? Yeah. But eventually you have to be, okay, I have to go back to the values.
Yes.
What is important here? Quality of work and dedication is fantastic and required and a given, but it's not on our values.
Yes.
The values should be my compass to make decisions. And my element here, my key element here is open to learn.
Yes.
And then the second one is teamwork. The third one, we're going through a list of the values, teamwork, and how we work with each other, and how we create a culture of support, positive regard, development, and all of that. And those two things were failing and non-existent. So I have to make a very difficult decision, and it wasn't easy.
Yeah, I can imagine, particularly in service-based businesses, franchise organizations, the people element is so crucial. And are there ways that you're kind of constantly trying to get feedback from the managers to stay on top of that? Because I think what you're talking about there is speed of decision making can be pretty crucial in these scenarios. So how do you stay on top of what's happening, good or bad, within such a large workforce?
I'm going to sort of bring back that question to the context of what I just shared. In that particular case, I think what I will have to learn from that is that I didn't act promptly enough.
Okay.
Because the evidence of his work was so strong.
Yeah.
And that I kind of and I also acted from the principle of everyone should be given feedback and given an opportunity first. You know, and people should be given the feedback and an opportunity to change. You should give the support before you make a decision.
Yes.
And I want to make sure I was fair with this individual as well, and that was done. So that made me take a little while. But then the other element related to your question is, well, I was making sure that I was listening
Yes.
to everybody. And eventually, after the complete picture was there, then it was clear to me that I needed to make a different type of decision. I think listening is a key skill that we business owners and leaders have to have, and not always we are prepared to have.
I would say it's probably one of the least.
Yes, exactly. We always giving solutions and answers and
yeah,
teaching everybody how to do things,
guilty,
right?
Guilty as charged. So yeah,
and it's not easy to be in a good listening mode.
For sure. Really fascinated. Just you kind of touched on franchise principles. So really curious, as you and your business partner are expanding and looking at different franchises, are you developing a kind of a playbook or scorecard as to how you identify the right location, the right type, those kind of things, or is it something you kind of learn as you go?
A bit of both. I think part of what's interesting and what got me really excited about where we are now is that for pretty much 15 years almost, I've just been involved with franchise business. In fact, I had somebody once saying, okay, well, you're not really an entrepreneur. You're a business operator. You didn't create this business.
How did you feel when they asked you that?
So let's buy that and have another conversation about that. This was in a big public forum. I thought it was really interesting. And actually, I thought, you know what? I never thought about that, but you're right.
Yeah, okay.
Because I never actually created this business. Depends on what your definition.
I would disagree with that.
Depends on what's your definition of entrepreneurship, yeah? So we can circle back to the debate.
Yeah, I'm circling with that, but I would be taking that very offensively if I was in your shoes.
I did for the first few minutes, and then I just reflect on it and say, well, saw it differently. But what was in my mind was always like, I always have this creative streak in me, and I always felt that I wanted to create my own brand. And after that particular situation with this person, I said, well, one day I will create even my own product.
Yeah.
Which I then went on to do during COVID by creating a company called the Terracotta Herbs, which we designed literally a kit, though you will sell online, and there's another story for later on. But
sorry, it's been here all day.
But at some point, when I left the corporate career, which I was doing simultaneously as growing my software business and the other franchise business. In 2012, I left PwC and I said, well, I just want to set up, initially I thought it would be a small training coaching company,
yes,
helping other entrepreneurs to grow their own business. But then very easy, I started to realize that I miss being in the heat of it all and building my thing. And I thought, what will be the next business? I don't want to operate another franchise. I mean, franchise has so many incredible and attractive benefits, but I think I have now 15 years of franchising experience across 3 brands, plus business degree and a master's in consulting and creating businesses and processes and systems.
Pretty qualified, yeah.
And I thought, I think I've got everything that is required to build a franchise.
Yes.
And I just went not looking actively for something, but I thought, I kind of put it out there for the universe. I just want my next project to be my own brand. Didn't know what product, nothing.
Yes.
After all, according to this person, I'm not an entrepreneur, so I don't create products. So I could never come up with the original idea. Somebody later defined me as, you're not the 0 to 1 person, you are the 1 to 100. And I say, well,
I'd rather be 1 to 100 than 0 to 1.
But then
this person sounds terrible, by the way.
But what's interesting is actually started to work with a couple of guys, Venezuelan guys, that had started a little business, a restaurant, Venezuelan restaurant.
Yeah.
So because we're fellow Venezuelans, they hear about me, we became friends, and they knew about my sober background and all of that. And they had set up this little market stall in Camden Market selling arepas, which is a Venezuelan cornbread. And they were the very first ones to sell arepas in the country. They started about, I think, 10, 12 years ago now. And then from there, they went on to open a cafe in Haggerston.
Yes.
And that cafe evolved to kind of, the restaurant. And one day they had the host of Sunday brunch in Channel 4 coming to have Venezuelan brunch, and they didn't know he was there. He was very impressed. And then next thing, they are invited to Channel 4 to Sunday brunch to talk about the Venezuelan brunch. After that little restaurant had a queue outside of waiting for half an hour, 45 minutes to get a table for months on end. And the product was amazing. The quality is fantastic. The guys later on, a few months later, tell me, we know the product is good. We know we got the right proposition. It's not about quality. It's not about product. It's not about the clientele. But somehow we're not making money.
That's our margins.
So can you help us? So actually, they became a client of mine in my little consulting company.
Yeah.
And we worked together for a little consulting project for 6 months. Then we looked at the model, at the processes, at the markets, and everything else. We turned it around really quickly. In about 8 months, we were already in profit, and that was the whole thing.
No, can't brush over that so quickly. Let's dig into that in a second. So, you've got this incredibly exciting food business, bustling community in Haggerston, mad for the food. Business model's not checking out. What bit within the model did you kind of uncover to kind of get them into that better profitable space?
I think the first thing was just exactly looking at financial models. Okay, where are your numbers? How much are you selling? What are your costs? What are the whole structure? It's almost like, where is your P&L kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there isn't one. There wasn't one there. Yeah. The data was very limited, and like many great startups, these are business owners that are running the business. They're working in the business, not on the business. And they're concerned with the quality of the food and serving the customers, and the owner was delivering the food to tables, and all of that. And so, there's no time to sit down on a computer to analyze stuff.
Yes.
And they didn't have any experience before in setting a restaurant or working in the industry at all. So it was all about uncovering first what's a financial model here, getting data. I'm very data driven. I like to see KPIs for absolutely everything that we can, measure everything that we can, see what's working, what isn't working. So we started to put all those kind of things in place. It was very obvious really quickly that they were overstaffed, and they were paying very high salaries to managers or supervisors that were not required. So we optimized that to streamline it very quickly. What I particularly found fascinating working with them was that having done consulting before in large corporations, you plan all these projects, and you've got project managers, and this change will come in the next following phase 2, and phase 2 never actually happens, and you never see the impact of what you're doing. But as here, it's like, okay, guys, tomorrow you're gonna have to go and do this, and this person is being fired, and this is happening, and you're changing these prices here, and then literally next week we could just see automatically the numbers in the bank. It must be so
exciting for them.
And it was just invigorating and
do you was there kind of like tools or software you were kind of getting them to jump on board with to be able to start to visualize the numbers in action?
Not right away. We started to just work with spreadsheets and getting data, but the POS that they had, the software system for the till was quite simple, difficult to work with. And one of the first things that we did is we moved to one that will give us more data.
Like a toaster.
Similar, we used Tevalis, and they were not doing stock takes, for example. There was no way of measuring the food costs and all of that. We just essentially learned, and I learned with them as well. It's fascinating, and that's why I was so passionate about it. And then we went working across all the different systems or subsystems of business. We looked at finance, then we looked at the customer journey, then we looked at the product quality, then we looked at the marketing and the offering. And we just spent a whole year going around the full cycle of different areas. And I love how fascinating it was and how open they were also to implementing the changes and making it happen. And the long story is that a year and a half after that, being so involved with the team, they say, we know that this is great and we're not making money out of it, but we know we're not going to make $1 million out of it, and we want to grow, and we know we need to have more than one unit.
Yes.
So could you help us prepare a pack, a pitch deck for investors to go and open a second? Well, I said, well, I'll be interested.
Yes.
And my business partners will be interested. So why don't we invest? And then we started a journey of negotiating and all of that. And eventually we ended up taking the majority of the business. They're still on board.
Yes.
And I thought, I didn't realize it came through the back door, but this is my baby.
Awesome.
And here is where not only I can just put my stamp on things and turn this little idea that somebody created from 0 to 1 to hopefully make it to 100. And I think your question originally was about the foundations and the systems of as franchise guidelines and all of that.
Yeah, and I suppose just on that then, you talked really being data-driven, KPI orientated. So did you have a baseline set of metrics that you were applying and that you now have that you're tracking?
Oh yeah, every single Monday we're there looking at that dashboard.
Yeah,
we literally call it a dashboard.
Is it? I love this stuff. But is the dashboard is it ready-made? Do you use the software?
We're gonna get very nerdy now.
Yeah, I know. But do you
I still use Google Sheets.
Google Sheets, yeah, and you've just different feed centers from accountancy software or POS.
We have our own ecosystem of different pieces of software. They're all integrated as well. So our scheduling system is connected to Xero, and it's connected to our POS, and it's connected to everything. So the data flows automatically.
Amazing.
But it is difficult. I guess it's not difficult. We just haven't given the priority or the cost that it takes to create this very customized report.
Yes.
But it's easy for us, for the managers, actually, when they close the week, they look at the numbers, and we want them to look at the numbers and want them to really understand what's the story behind the numbers and what's happening. And then they enter the data progressively. It takes them just about 15-20 minutes.
And
they fill in this report, if you like, spreadsheet, and then that automatically feeds into a bigger piece. We looked at every single week. We looked at, okay, what was the sales, but also what was the labor cost? What was the food cost by the stock? Of course, how much we bought, how much we sold, how much, all of that sort of stuff. And we looked at how many drinks per person have been sold.
Talk to me about finding kind of the next spot and how do you analyze that? Because from various different business owners we've had on Take the Plunge, finding units is really, really challenging, particularly in leisure, in restaurants and food. How do you do that in such a big, vast city like London?
We learn as we go along. We certainly have made some wrong decisions as well. And it has been hard to us trying to rectify those things and trying to keep things alive when we can. But originally we thought, based on the Haggerston model, that it was key that we were a neighborhood restaurant and that the location have to have some sort of level of footfall. So the Haggerston location is right by the canal, beautiful views, and when it's good weather, we have Columbia Market near there, Broadway Market near there, so there's a lot of traffic. It's a very seasonal restaurant. In winter, it goes kind of quieter, but in summer, it's just incredibly busy. Bethnal Green was our second site. It was in a little strip of arches under the railway, and then we have other neighbors that are food related and drink places, so that sort of drives the traffic as well. Whereas in Stowell, we went into a neighborhood restaurant concept again. We were very attracted by the proposition of the site, because that's another thing that business owners have to consider. Okay, do I get a shell, and do I pay for the entire fit out, for which I need capital, and then I come to you guys to get some money?
Love a kitchen fit out or a reverb.
Or do I want to take on a lease of an existing restaurant I want to sell? And I pay a premium and I get the fixtures, the fittings, and the equipment and all of that. So it's kind of a trade-off. Sometimes the opportunity, what's the rent? What do I get with the premium? How is this to set it up? We're currently in the process of opening in Elephant Park in the next couple of months, and that's a completely different format there because it's a brand new unit shell. It takes months to get permissions, to get everything. You have to involve architects and designers and regulations. It's just a completely different story.
Yeah.
So I guess part of the decision is also how quick do I want to open? How much money do I have to make it my own, or as opposed to take somebody else's and just maybe redecorate it or repurpose it a bit. Certainly, putting a place in a high footfall location is a critical factor of success. And I think that's something that we knew from Subway, And I think we kind of put it to our side when we made a couple of decisions, well, a particular decision with Arepa, and we like saying, well, now we definitely know that it has to be in a place where there is high footfall.
Yeah.
But of course, that also requires courage, because those high footfall locations have very, very, very high rents.
Yeah.
And then you start thinking, okay, well, will I make this work?
Yeah.
Right? So in our model, 10% of the turnover should go into rents and rates.
Yes.
So it's very easy. Okay, what's the rent there? Okay, can I make this number? And we're like, oh, we've never done it somewhere else. What if we don't? And then we are, of course, with this responsibility or liability of having to pay this rent all the time. So it's hard. It's hard, and I think the beauty is that it gets easier as you go bigger.
Yes.
Because of course you have other businesses that can help you to finance that while you establish the clientele in there.
Well, I suppose digging into that, like, how has financing played a role throughout the last 20 odd years between different businesses? Have you always liked to bootstrap things, or have you looked at different ways as you've gone through your different ventures?
I think we've been very lucky, starting back from the Subway business, that we had very profitable units, and our expansion was made based on, we actually never took money out of the business. There was never a sign of a dividend. And I think that's why I always had two jobs, because I was have the business, but then I have my corporate career, my corporate job on the side. So the business was always my hustle on the side. And because, of course, the moment you take money out of business, you have to pay all these different taxes and income tax, and then you want to put it back again. Well, what's the point of taking it out? You could have reinvested within the company. So our expansion strategy was always to accumulate all those profits, keep them in the company. Automatically, we get to an amount where it enables us to open the next one. Then, okay, off we go to the next one. And that's pretty much how Subway was built, our own Subway company. Then there was a point where we're like, okay, well, we can open more Subways within the territory we have, because we're stealing our own customer from one store to the next.
Yeah.
And what do we do now? And we wanted to diversify. So we went looking for other opportunities, and then CeX came along.
Yeah.
It was recommended to us by our accountants, and my brother, who is also a business partner of mine and is part of the business, said, you know what, I'm kind of bored Subway. I want to do something different. I'll take the lead. I'll spearhead that. I'll go and get the training, and I'll set it up. And I said, okay, great. And then we fund that from the Subway proceeds. And then CeX was an incredible business. Ever since we opened the first one, it was just like, bam, return investment, bam, return investment, bam, return investment. It was just a great model. And I think that's the beauty of getting into franchises. You know,
if it works,
you buy into something that is established, that it will work. Let's leave the conversation out if it works, as in what franchise you're getting into. Of course, you want something that is solid, proven. Because I also got into franchises that didn't work.
Yes. Okay, tell me about that.
Set up a beauty spa clinic franchise. There was a Spanish brand coming to UK.
Yes.
My sister was like, oh, I'll take the lead on that. I said, okay, well, I'll do the business. I'll lead the franchise and everything. We opened it. Ran for 3 years, just breaking even. There was misrepresentation of the numbers that we initially reached on. There was no processes in place to really support the franchisee. It's like, and it's interesting. And now I see it so often. I see businesses with 3 or 4 little stores and say, now we're franchising. It's like, how can you franchise so early?
Yeah.
You need to have a supply chain behind you. You need to have all sort of things to be able to. And you haven't really proven your model in very different settings, enough. Yeah. And I think it's a risk. So if you want to get into a franchise, definitely you need to do your homework and make sure it's a very solid model been replicated many times in very different contexts and settings, because that's the only proof that you have that's going to work. And also, part of why those models work, you put the name outside, and people come because they know the name.
Yeah.
Okay, I know CeX. I know exactly what I'm getting. It's a great brand. It's recognized. I know Subway. I go into Subway. Bread, Itsu, whatever you want to call it. They're recognized. I go. Whereas if it's a brand that doesn't have brand recognition, you're kind of helping the franchisor to build a brand.
Yes.
And you're paying them for it.
Yes.
I think that's the difference there.
Yeah.
But we were talking about the funding.
Yeah, the funding side of things. Yeah, sorry, kind of.
Yeah, so CeX primarily funded, again, self-funded, all of that. And later on, when we came to then do Arepa, then there was a different story because the two founders were there. And then from our own company, then we created a vehicle to fund that. So technically, we're investors, even though
Yes.
we have control of the business.
Yes.
But because there's a different shareholding there, of course, we are now in a situation where, okay, well, where does additional funding come from? You know, and we are approaching the moment where we are now thinking, okay, who can help us to get some funding so that this brand on its own can actually continue to grow without us having to change the shareholding.
Yes.
Yeah, because yes, we could have more capital to put into a business, but are they prepared to sell? And is that what we want?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, we
So
want
it's
to
all
keep
about
them on board. So it's all about we now,
non-dilutive funding.
yeah, get into different territories.
Yeah.
So
Nice. And I suppose just generally, like, you talk obviously with great passion about all this, but it's so impressive what you have done in terms of all these different franchises, whilst also, as you nonchalantly touched on, had a job at PwC as well. How do you manage so many different components from the initial franchises you have, the newer ones, the Arepa model? Is that something you just enjoy, having things going up multiple times?
yeah, I think always, I guess I've been a workaholic, I have to admit. But I guess some people also say out there, I think for me, work had never been felt work like work. I think for me, work is joy. And what I love of what I do is that I'm constantly learning, and that for me is one of the biggest sources of happiness. And I was invited to a tech talk in Germany a few years ago, and the title of my talk was "Entrepreneurship as a Source of Happiness."
Yeah.
And it's because I consider that entrepreneurship and business actually a value of mine, and I think it's a practice, and I think I just see it as my playground, and particularly now working with a brand that I can create from, change the menu, change the brand, change the color, change everything about it.
Yeah.
It's just I'm playing a little Monopoly game, but with the real face, it's just fantastic.
Yeah.
And yes, there was times in my life where maybe it was too much to levels that I was neglecting other areas. And I think over the last few years, it's more about getting the right balance.
Yeah.
To make it more sustainable as well.
Yeah.
The secret, though, has been not just being a workaholic. The secret has been always to have a great team around me. And it's not just me. I've not done this on my own. And I always say that because I think, it's very easy to come into a little podcast like this to say, I think somebody said one of those Instagram quotes that comes up when you're scrolling and say, like, when it comes to going well, you'll take all the credit. When it comes to going badly, you blame the economy and you blame everybody else. I think it's about being very fair. And actually, yes, I can appreciate that a lot of stuff has been achieved, but also it has not just been me.
Yeah.
And it's not because I'm the smarter in the room, quite the opposite. I think I was never the smart kid in school. I don't think I have any particular unique talent different than anybody else. I think it has been the grit and the resilience and the sticking to it and having amazing people around me that have contributed. I think it's that combination. None of this would have been possible without the input of my brother, of Sue, my business partner from Subway originally, her partner, who is also a business partner now, and Julio, another business partner who now looks after the Subway business. We all put in a piece. And particularly within the business, the managers, it's impossible to run good restaurants if you don't have good managers. My role, I see it now, is how can I support those managers? How can I develop them as much as I can and coach them and make them feel happy so that they can then make a great business?
Amazing.
And I think the business now getting to a point where the business has its own personality and own soul, and we'll see where it goes from here. It's no longer my baby; it is an individual.
Yeah. And just take one of your analogies there. What's next on the Monopoly board?
The dream at the moment is there's a philosophical, emotional dream or goal, rather, vision, which is that we want to really put the map of Venezuela in Londoners' minds. Not everyone knows where Venezuela is.
Yeah.
It's not one of the most well-known countries. When people think about South America, they would think about Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, particularly with cuisines or destinations. Most people will not actually be aware, of course, of the economical and political crisis in the country over the last 6-7 years that have made 7 million people leave.
Yeah.
It's a humanitarian crisis like any of these other countries in war, actually. And so we want to bring awareness to that, but we want to be ambassadors of the food and the culture. The food is also a great proposition. It's, of course, unbiased, it's delicious, but it's gluten-free, naturally gluten-free, and, it's all these other options. I think, well, the dream is now, how do we turn this into a very attractive casual dining concept? I admire brands like Rossestai. Again, they started from an arch, literally like we did.
Yes.
And they went to then have 9 sites, and then were sold to private equity groups, and then you see Rossestai everywhere.
Yes.
The likes of Busaba, Oaxaca.
Yeah.
Certain reservations there about their business models and their financial stability, but I see us as the next, or the Oaxaca of Venezuelan food.
Amazing.
The Busaba of Venezuelan foods. There are inspirations for me, and that's a vision. So we're on 4 sites now. I think we're aiming to get to 10 in the next 2-3 years. So let's see how it goes. COVID came along.
That was a challenge for everyone.
to spice things up a little bit, to test our determination and resilience, and here we are still. So
amazing. Well, I feel that I'm pretty confident that you'll no doubt hit that 10 and many more, and maybe be the next Honest Burger Oaxaca or what have you next. But it's been such a pleasure, Ernesto, to listen to you and hear everything and just the energy you put into it. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing a bit of your story, and wish you so much luck with everything, and hope it goes so well.
No, thank you so much for having me, and it just got me really excited. And now I'm gonna crack on with the rest of the day. Let's do it.
Let's bring Caracas to London. Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Yeah, and I can't wait to try Arepa.
Thank you.
Awesome. That was great.